At 5:30 PM, I'd like to call to order the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee. We have roll call, please.
Chair Cardinal.
Here.
Vice Chair Hanneman. Member Barrett. Here. Member Bowden. Here. Member Wolf. Member Smith.
Here.
The quorum's present.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up for any public comment. It's usually all or nothing when it comes to that, so today's a nothing. So we'll move on to the agenda item number 3 for possible action approval of the minutes from December 2nd, 2019.
Sorry. I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting item 4A for possible action discussion and possible action to elect a chairperson and vice chairman for calendar year 2020. Lee, do you have anything you want to say on that?
No, just for the benefit of everybody, the policy is that a chairperson can serve 2 consecutive years before taking a year off. Current chair Cardinal has served 2 years, so you should elect another chairperson, although he could serve as vice chair, as could anybody else. And your bylaws also say that the supervisor serving on the board cannot be a chair or vice chair, so Commissioner Barrett is out of the running.
Thank you, Lee. Anyone have anything they'd like to bring up, mention?
Question. So, is this on?
Yeah, now you're on.
Question. So, Vice Chair Hanneman is absent. Is she eligible that we can nominate her for the position as Vice Chair? Because usually it's been customary the Vice Chair would just roll into that position if there's no opposition to that.
She's eligible to be appointed tonight, yes.
And she's been chair before, too, before she took her time off, so.
I would like to make a motion that Ronnie Hanneman, I would like to vote Ronnie Hanneman as a board chair.
Can we do this one at a time, Lee? Okay, so, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of Ronnie as chair? Or do we need a second?
We need a second.
Oh, sorry.
Make a motion to second, please.
Okay, so now, after second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Do we have anyone that wants to look at the position for vice chair, or anyone they think they want to have be vice chair?
I heard somebody talk about flipping them, and that would make you vice chair unless somebody else is interested. Are you interested?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I understand that Court Cardinal might become the vice chair. If he's interested, he says he is.
If you guys want me as vice chair, I'd be happy to be vice chair.
I think you'd be good in charge of vice.
Get things cleaned up, right? I'm not sure I can make a motion for myself, though, so.
I second that motion.
We have to make the motion, right? Okay.
John, was that your
No,
motion?
it was not.
Oh.
All right.
thought it was his
I'll make the
motion.
motion.
Okay.
As a board member, I don't like to make motions on this committee.
I move to elect Chair Court Cardinal as vice chairperson for 2020.
I second the motion.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Since Ronnie isn't here to hand the gavel to, because she's up in Alaska tonight, I will continue on in her absence, moving to agenda item 4B for possible action discussion and possible action to make recommendations to the Redevelopment Authority regarding the allocation of the undesignated redevelopment funds for fiscal year 2020-21 and estimated future allocations for the following 4 years to implement redevelopment objectives. This is something we go through every year, so it's time. So Lee?
Yep, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. I'll be going through this with you, leading the discussion a little bit. You certainly have the report attached and information with the background on the project. As you mentioned, this is something we do every year at this time to bring forward to the Board of Supervisors, also as the Redevelopment Authority, for consideration for inclusion of things in the budget, in particular in the next upcoming fiscal year, the process of which begins, usually in April, leading to the adoption of the budget in June. So this is the time of year to make the recommendation so it gets in the tentative budget. A little bit more about background on this. We've been doing this for a number of years. It's recommendations on next year's budget, and then the following 4 years tentatively assigning future redevelopment funds to certain projects. What you have on the screen up there right now is the allocation plan as approved by the Board of Supervisors last year. So it includes in the far left column this current fiscal year's allocations and budgeted items, including those most of the projects for which the expenditures have already been allocated. Just a little bit to note, last year, if you remember a year ago, we had a list of a number of additional projects that were being considered, infrastructure, public works, parks and rec projects that were considered. That was kind of the first year we went out and solicited and asked for those applications to come in. And you actually, last year, the RAC spent a lot of time vetting those and kind of coming away with a little bit of policy on the types of projects that you felt redevelopment should fund. And actually, as a result of all those projects that came in last year, really you'll see that there's nothing new to present, no new request right now this year. Actually, those projects are with the updates in there. You can see a lot of them are still underway. A lot of projects are still rolling into next year and are going to carry over. And really the capacity of city staff for new projects is not really there right now, but if something comes up, and there are some things like the 3rd Street lot that are probably going to come back around for RAC consideration throughout the year, and if something new comes in, we'll bring it to you. But I don't have a lot of new projects for you to consider tonight. So you have the report and you have a lot of things. So there's just a couple things I want to point out. First of all, the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding this line item here. It's the utility. It's currently the Utility Extension Assistance Program. It's something we've kind of assigned money for. This is the result of, from a few years ago, a particular property where there's literally not city water to it yet, and it takes some extension to get it there. And as a result of that discussion, felt, well, if there's other cases like that where there's utilities need to be relocated or extended to serve a parcel, let's have a pool of money that's available for that type of request. And we actually haven't had that type of request, which I guess in a way shows we actually, that type of utility infrastructure is generally there to serve most of the property within Carson City, so it's not utilized. And we're going to have this discussion in the next one, but what did come up is, kind of thinking of another way, there other kind of that public infrastructure to assist the new development coming in and rehabilitation of properties might be a sidewalk program. So the recommendation on this is kind of subject to your action on the next one, but that's okay. So I just kind of highlight that that's there right now, but completely subject to what action you take on the next one. The second part that I want to talk about, and is in the packet also, is related to the downtown sidewalks, undergrounding of power, and gas lamp replacement project, which we had a lot of discussion on last year, have allocated funding to a little bit each year over 5 years. And some of it has been used towards those projects. But what Public Works has included in the packet and is presenting for your consideration is a way to reshuffle things around, combine some funds, and actually lump it together in a larger amount of funds at one time to actually get a project done at one time. There's a lot of efficiency there. $100,000 really doesn't go a long way in terms of undergrounding power when you start getting into that work. So if you look in your packet, you have this sheet, and then you have the sheet that's Public Works Alternative, which is so with the current funding in this year that's already been approved, they already are in the works to do improvements on Telegraph Street. So that's already in the works. And then, as they describe, instead of kind of spreading the funding out over the next 4 or 5 years, within the budget, they're requesting in the next fiscal year to use $1 million to do a larger project that includes the sidewalks, undergrounding, and lamps on Curry Street. And then the following year, the remainder, about a little over $500,000 to finish off that project, which will carry over. And kind of going back and forth again, you'll note kind of if you look at the very bottom line there is the undesignated, so it's the pool of money that's not otherwise allocated, anticipated funds that redevelopment is going to have that's not otherwise unallocated to a project. Over the next 5 years under the current plan here, it's about 4.5 million total and undesignated, and actually there's with the Public Works proposal is to combine it, do it sooner, and actually that leaves it's about $50,000 less over the next 4 years. Or no, it's 500,000. Sorry. So there's 5 million available instead of 4.5. So there's $500,000 more in the long run. Now that's not to say as individual projects come up, we'd likely come back with the capital improvement request for individual projects. Not to say we're done with all improvements downtown after this, but this is a way within the budget to put a project together that actually gets some improvements done. And Dan Stuckey's here, the city engineer, to answer any questions you have regarding that. Everything else, I think, is, if you have any questions on any specific projects, you can ask. The staff report went over them and the status update of some of them. So I'll conclude with that, and both Dan and I are available to answer any questions.
I'm just looking through trying to figure out what's getting lumped into the whole Curry Street that was like itemized out and the one that was above right now is all I'm doing.
Yeah, what's lumped into the Curry Street is these 3 lines. So it was 200,000 per year for sidewalk improvements, 100,000 per year for undergrounding the power lines, and 85,000 per year for gas lamp replacement. And the totals are on the far right column there. Well, actually, those aren't the total. Yeah, no, they're not the totals, because that total is the 5-year total and doesn't include the current fiscal year. So it's in sidewalk improvements, it's a total of 1 million over 5 years, 500,000 over 5 years for undergrounding, and then a little bit less than that for the gas lamps. Do you see that now? Okay. And those elements are included in that. All of those elements are included together in that Curry Street project.
And if I read that correctly with what's highlighted, all of those except for the one that we're going to talk about next has already been approved by the city supervisors anyway, right?
Well, it was last year, and right, if you go to, the fiscal year, next year's column there, those are all projects that were approved last year, and there's nothing new to add that's before you tonight.
So in all likelihood, they're just going to stay that course and keep going, so.
Yeah, I think the one recommendation, so in your motion, I guess to be clear, if your recommendation is to buy off on Public Works plan to combine it and use the funds and, kind of move the funds forward that are available to get a bigger project done in fiscal year 21, which is this spreadsheet, and in particular, this line item, if your motion would include that recommendation, then that's how we would budget it for next year, to replace those 3 line items on the previous one.
I got you. So it takes a lot of that undesignated and moves it forward, which is what's taking place. And the thing that I'm kind of okay with is it's still leaving 80 versus 86,000 in undesignated for fiscal year 2021, and something comes up that we have no idea is around the corner.
Yeah, and Third Street, and that's before other roll forwards. I mean, we're getting, at this point, we're getting close to the end of the year. I've sent out information on facade improvements. We're not getting any bites there so far. So, there's those types of funds and just other cost savings that will likely roll forward to make that number larger as well.
Well, I think the only other thing I have to say is anytime you can do something and in the process, look at saving, $500,000, that's always a positive thing. And
I think, and that's the point of not just the long-term savings, but in doing a project, the efficiencies of getting the bids and on a per block basis, you're going to get a better price when you're doing it as a bigger project.
I think that covers most of the questions that I had. Any members have any questions? Nope. Any public comment? Dan, do you want to say anything about it, or?
Dan Stuckey, city engineer for the record. So I did want to point out, NV Energy actually just came out this last year with an underground, overhead power underground management plan. And Carson City had a seat at the table during that process. And what it was is a way that NV Energy can contribute funds, and then the county or city can contribute funds together as a match to underground power in redevelopment areas or along corridors that we're trying to beautify. And so that plan was approved and it's in place right now. And Curry Street is a great candidate for that. So we're hoping that we can recoup some of those funds from NV Energy to help do that underground power. So I did want to point that out. So hopefully this estimate includes the city coming to the table with all that money, but hopefully we will see some savings on that as we work through that process. And we're one of their first tests on this, so we've been already working with them and they know about this project. And so I just wanted to let you all know about that.
Excellent.
Cool. So I guess if that were the case and we got some funds, then they just go back into the undesignated pool? Is that how that works?
I would say probably.
Yeah, there's a couple possibilities that if the project costs this much, which is what they've planned for, is the project costs this much, and they don't use up all of this, then it would be roll into the undesignated.
Okay. I'm just curious, just for my information. So if what wasn't used, it wouldn't just be allocated to something else within the project, or that we haven't looked at, or
Yeah,
I'm just wondering for myself.
Yeah, I think if there's clearly a possibility, since this was a pool of money that wasn't there before, that there's other areas that we would want to do. But I think reasonably we would come back if it's not part of, there's a couple things that could actually cost more than they estimate and use a little bit more. But on the other hand, if they go outside of the Curry Street project itself to use these matching funds, we'd come back and make that request.
Yeah, it would have to fall under the parameters of what's already been approved, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought.
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? No, so I guess the item at us right now is to approve the regular budget allocations or approve the Public Works alternative budget allocations for fiscal year 2021. So is there anyone that would like to entertain a motion to that effect? I think we all agree on the one that is alternative, unless I'm missing something. Is that right, or am I?
Sorry, Chair. So I just wanted to clarify for the record. I mean, we were having a sidebar here for a second based on what you were saying a second ago. I just wanted to make sure that, this committee is making a recommendation based on, those budgeted allocations to incorporate those allocations. We're not actually approving those allocations. It's just a recommendation to the RDA.
Anyone want to take a run at it?
I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move to recommend to the Redevelopment Authority the allocation of undesignated redevelopment infrastructure funds as recommended by the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee.
With the Public Works alternative, would that be the one you're recommending?
Yes, thank you.
There a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So moving right into the next, or backing up one spot actually to a degree for possible action, discussion of according recommendations to the Redevelopment Authority concerning the adoption of standards of the Utility Extension and Sidewalk Grant Program.
Yeah, again, Lee Plemmel, Community Development. So again, the staff report's attached. I'll give a little bit of summary for your benefit and anybody else listening. As I noted, we've had a Utilities Assistance Grant Program for at least allocated funding to it for the last few years, but it's gone untapped because it was specifically identified to extend utilities to a property that needs it with new development. Something that has come up 2 or 3 times in the last year on development in the redevelopment area, and it's coming up more and more, is required sidewalk improvements when somebody's coming in and making improvements to their property, and it's a change of use. They're required by code at the same time to bring their frontage up to compliance in terms of ADA, which has at times included not only fixing sidewalk panels, but when there's a non-compliant ADA ramp in front of that property, they have to replace that ramp at a cost of approximately $5,000 or so. And it's an unanticipated cost to the property owner in that redevelopment. It's somebody in their redevelopment of their building and property. They're doing something that's improving the building, getting a new use in a building, and it's an unanticipated cost. So I was thinking that with the intent of that utility extension, it's similar intent to what the utility extension program was, which is to help those businesses with the off-site improvements that are required by the city. They have to have them, they have to get them there, but the cost burden is typically on them. So thought that possibly perhaps it's a way to implement a similar program, similar to the facade. I use the facade improvement program just as an example in here of how it's laid out. We would do a utility assistance and sidewalk improvement program the same way. So tonight I'd like to go through, and if the RAC is even willing to entertain the idea, to go through some of the regulations that we would impose in terms of the eligibility and how much money and all of those other things to make. And it's on the agenda tonight to make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority if we get that far. If it's something you want to discuss tonight and come back and see the finished product, I'm happy to do that too, so we could see how the discussion goes.
Thanks, Lee. I see John itching at the microphone over here, so I have a feeling you have something to say.
Don't know that I'm itching. No, I have a question, and I think I know the answer, but you're never sure. We require that they do this when they do the improvements, but does not the federal government require us to do these ADA things sooner or later?
At the same time, and Dan may be able to help me, I don't know if how involved he is, but my understanding is the city is under a program that is systematically upgrading to ADA, upgrading sidewalks to ADA standards. That's a years, if not decades-long program to do that.
So in other words, it's government telling this person, if they're gonna make an improvement, we'd like you to do this too, and we'll help you out a little.
That's how the program would work, right?
Yeah, so as Dan Stuckey, city engineer for the record. So yeah, as Lee mentioned, we on our public works jobs, I mean, depending, like if we do a roadway reconstruct, typically we upgrade ramps with that, as it's a federal requirement that if you're reconstructing a roadway, the adjacent ramps will need to be updated to meet federal guidelines for ADA.
So I think this, if I'm hearing correctly, our facade, and I see where you're kind of getting the model for this with the facade improvement program, which is kind of a voluntary thing that we've been doing to help beautify downtown. But if I'm hearing this right, it's not a voluntary, it's a compensatory thing that the government is saying, you have to do this, period. So we're just being a helping community to try and help them out with that expense. Am I just summarizing that correctly?
Yes. And I'm prepared with the slides to walk through as it is, starting on page 2, to go through the various elements, like I said, eligible properties, ineligibility, eligible improvements and such, to get direction on those elements of it individually, if you like to walk through them one at a time like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, thanks.
Okay, so it's starting on page 2, and I'll pull them up on the screen, eligible properties. And what I've done, as in the staff report, I've kind of listed all the alternatives that you might consider, but also in each one, based on discussions we've had in the past and based on the facade improvements, I have some recommendations. For example, with the eligibility, like with the facade improvements, you can consider all non-residential properties within the district, all properties within the district, which would include residential properties. Consider limiting it to certain geographic areas, such as the downtown, or limited to new construction or remodeling, which requires eligible utility extensions or sidewalk improvements. Consistent with the facade improvement program would be numbers 1 and 4 up there, which is that all non-residentially zoned properties within the district would be eligible. And then number 4, kind of as we're talking about the people that are obligated to do this, is for new construction or remodeling that requires it.
Yeah, so far I would say I agree with that. I think number 4 is a no-brainer. It's not just if you want to do it, it's being required to do it through either new or remodeling. Anybody
Any
have
other
any
comments on that?
comments or ideas on that? I think, yeah, I like number 1. I'm not really in favor personally of looking at it for residential properties, because it's not a business type oriented thing, and I'm not sure if there's any geographic area. I mean, if you're being told you have to do this, you have to do this,
And with residential properties, the only time it would come up as a requirement is if somebody was building a new multifamily project. There's very rare instances, I can't think of any, when a single-family residence is required to construct a sidewalk. Okay, the next one on there is ineligible properties, and I think looking at those, all of those are ineligible per the facade improvements, so assuming we want to keep those things, well, we just addressed the one, residentially zoned properties would be excluded. Also, another one to consider that had a lot of discussion with the facade improvement program is property receiving sales tax incentives or other ongoing tax incentives from the city, excluding the historic property tax deferment. That would be consistent with the facade improvement program. You got to be current on your property taxes, not have any unresolved code enforcement issues, and you can't have already done the work and then come ask us for it. Any others or comments on that?
I'd agree with all the above.
I would agree.
Got a board of nods on all of those, so that's noted. And then, so the eligible improvements. This is also, so we're talking about sidewalks, but this is also an opportunity to actually put into policy and writing to include the utilities extension. So all of these do apply to both utility extension and sidewalk grants. So the eligible improvements for extensions could include water mains, sewer mains, power line, or other utility extensions within the right-of-way to serve the property. If it needs to be extended, it's not there. Those same types of utility, if there are relocations on properties necessary to facilitate development. So there are situations where utility lines go through the center of properties that would definitely need to be relocated for consolidated development of the property. It would eligible for new ADA curb ramps at intersections when required by city code as part of a construction project, which is what we talked about at the start as well, or replacement of existing sidewalk sections when required as part of a project when required by the city. And also, another one that has actually come up, which is landscaping within the right-of-way consistent with the downtown landscape improvements. So something that's not something that's required. It's something that would be an enhancement. So it's not, we're required to have the sidewalk fixed, but let's say somebody wants to include some landscape planters so that our streetscape looks nicer. So that might be something to discuss a little bit, but that's something that you might consider for being eligible for this as well. It's another public improvement. So thoughts on that?
Off the top of my head, the 3 and 4, I'm fine with the new and replacement ADA curb ramps and intersections required by code, because again, it's a requirement. Number 4 is also a requirement. 1 and 2, I'm having some issue with, because you may have to do that as you're in the process of doing something with the sidewalk, but it's not necessarily something that's being required, and quite frankly, 5, I'm not in favor of at this point.
So 1 and 2 gets to the original intent, which is to extend utilities when they're not there, when they are not to the frontage. Yeah.
I'm a little confused on 1 and 2. Are these would be city, or these would be we're forcing someone else to do it?
So when, they would, there's a few vacant properties where the water line, I could think of one couple where the water line in particular is 100 feet away, 200 feet away, whatever it is. It's not to the parcel frontage. And if that property owner wants to build on their property, it's their responsibility to extend the water line to get to their property.
Actually, the question in my mind was more on 2. Give me that picture.
Yeah, it's usually power line. So where the overhead power line bifurcates a parcel, and you're gonna develop it, want to put a building, taller than 2 or 3 story building, and the utilities need to be relocated. So there's a pretty big cost to relocation of the utilities, and that was part of the original intent of even of allocating the funding for utility extensions and relocation.
I understand the answer to those questions. I think, I understand when you say that the original intent was to help out with that. I just look at, I think we had $20,000 fiscally on that, and if someone's gonna put up a 2+ story building and develop it, and power lines are in their way, I think some help in some form of the $20,000 isn't gonna go very far. I can see that happening much more likely if somebody needs to get some water in in the original intent. That's 100 feet away, and you gotta get that water to your property. But when you're getting into the power lines and that, for me, I think, if you're gonna put that kind of money in as investment to the owner, then, I think you can do it on your own at that point. You don't really need our help, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm still against, personally, number 5. I think if you're gonna landscape, landscape, that's your responsibility, make it look nice. You've got code you have to do it within, and I think you need to take that into consideration when you're budgeting your projects. Anybody else? I'm up here talking all.
No, that's true on number 5, what you said.
On the other hand, I just wanted to throw out there maybe an expansion of the eligible ways for using this money to, for example, and I know I'm throwing out I'm opening a can of worms here, but talking about if you need to build an enclosure for a garbage can, an alcove, something like that, as part of code enforcement and beautification. So I know I'm opening a big can of worms, but I just want to throw it out for consideration. If there's some kind of expansion of, eligibility to encompass something like that.
I guess my question on that would be, is it a new code or a new requirement versus something that's already been in place that they knew about ahead of time? I would be more inclined to say, oh, you're going along, all of a sudden, here's a new law, here's a new code, here's a new rule. Geez, I wasn't expecting that. It came from left field. Can I have some help with that? Versus, again, going in eyes wide open in the beginning when you're putting in a business.
So just a thought on that, if I could. Right, that would seem like something, so we are, if it's going to be in the right of way in particular, which I think is kind of what we're talking about, I think we want to be able to help facilitate attractive enclosures and to hide these, right? And that's an ongoing discussion. I think that's something, though, we could certainly come back with this particular application for a specific project, rather than, and I think that might be the chair's vice chair's comfort level of just authorizing money to do it versus it coming as a project. That's more of an individual project. Let's look at it and come back with an application for that in particular when that occurs.
Yeah, and that could even potentially be included under a facade improvement if it's making something look very ugly and you're trying to, clean up a garbage area. So I think to summarize it, I think we're all good with 3 and 4, and probably number 1 in relation to water, but not really anything with power lines and that side of it.
Water and sewer for number 1, but delete power lines.
Yeah, I think once you're getting, I don't think any of us are really, like we said, if it's power lines, you're going up pretty high, which means it's costing some money versus anything you're doing at a ground level.
Is that a consensus of the?
Is everybody?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. We're doing good so far then. Next element is how much to require in matching funds. And may as well talk about how much, and along with that, the maximum funding amount. So like with the facade improvement, it's a 50% match required by the property owner, and it's up to a maximum amount that the city will pay. I get the recommendation, just to be consistent with that. I mean, I think that's what we're thinking is a 50% match from the property owner, and up to $5,000 for sidewalks on any one project. As noted in here is 20,000. What's shown there is 20,000 for utility extensions, which, as the chair noted, can be eaten up very quickly in digging and extending water or sewer lines. Of course, that's dependent on availability and coming back to the RAC and looking for it. So, perhaps there's other funds we could look for, but just consistent with what's been allocated, I left that at $20,000. Any other thoughts on that?
I'm okay with most all that, except for perhaps the term landscaping, because then it opens up that other Can.
Yep, that goes back to that, right? Landscaping is deleted.
Okay. Anybody else have anything?
And Lee, this landscaping is deleted in item 1 and 2, is that correct? For the maximum project funding amount?
Yes, yeah. So I think, we've decided it's not going to include landscaping in any
Okay,
case.
because I know in 2 it says other amount for sidewalks and landscaping.
In this section of it, would it be appropriate to address owner-builder issues and the cost to do that work when you're an owner-builder? I know that this has, been brought up in the past.
I know, and I had thoughts, I'm trying to remember what my thoughts were on this. So I think in this case, there's not a case where you're gonna bid this. So let's go through the scenario what we're talking about here. Somebody is improving their building. They have a contractor they have a building permit in, they have a contractor, they're gonna totally redo the interior of their building, they're gonna add on to it, whatever they're doing. And now they come into us, get our review and say, oh, you gotta build a curb ramp. They're not gonna go out and bid that project separate, they're going to include that with the work with their contractor. I don't think and even if that person's a contractor themselves, they don't have an incentive to get a higher price for it because they're still having to pay half of it. And we're going to review the cost and the billing and how much they actually paid to get it done. And we're only going to fund a maximum amount.
And that analysis I do agree with, but I still think that we've been presented before with bids that are market bids. And I still don't think a market price bid is appropriate when you're an owner builder, that we should be matching.
So we could, and I think you're right. And I can address that in writing it, that the reimbursement, let me see if reimbursement's an upcoming one, reimbursement of funds. I know that's a different type of reimbursement, but of paying out, I can write in there, because this is the point in the topic, that they are reimbursed based on their actual expense. So the contractor's still paying for the concrete and the crew to do it, and we've had things, and Public Works does it all the time, of getting the actual cost from contractors, so that's not a problem to get that from them and only reimburse on their actual cost. And I could write that in.
Okay, I would agree with that. Thank you.
$20,000 max on utility extension unless they obtain approval for more somehow through the RAP.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, there's only 20,000 in the entire budget, so
right.
one guy could take it.
Okay. 50%, right? That was the match we're okay with? Okay. Okay, then moving on to application review. So I think I see that there's 3 options here, which is for authorize the funding, adopt the policy, and allow staff approval that meets all the policy standards, have it come to the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee here. And I think you'll likely probably be considering one of those first 2, and then the third option would be to have them come to RAC for recommendation, then go to Redevelopment Authority for approval. I think for something like this, it's minor. I think with a facade improvement, you're talking $25,000 at a time. For the sidewalk improvements, they're in for building permits. They need help quick. I would suggest that you allow staff approval for that $5,000 per the policy, that they meet all the requirements there. Just for timing as much as anything, and then to have the utility line extension, which was the larger amount of money, come to RAC for approval. So that would be my recommendation.
I'm pretty much okay with that. I think we got rid of the utility line, the underground we left in. It was the power lines, right? Yeah. I think for sake of expedience and not tying up the wheels of everything, I think that's not a bad way to go.
Well, I can't obviously speak for the rest of the board. I don't know how they would feel about that. But it is a small amount, so I'll just let this committee decide, and the whole thing will go to the board, and if they have any objections, they'll bring it up, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the important thing is going to be seeing the policies that go along with it and the requirements.
Yeah, as long as all the requirements are met and policies are followed, then it shouldn't be an issue. So I think everybody's pretty much on board with that? Yep, okay.
With the facade improvement program, that includes a provision that if they sell the property within 1 year, they owe us the money back. I would suggest that's not really recommended. So in that case, we've given them money if they've improved their building that they own. In this case, the money goes towards right-of-way improvements, which arguably benefits the property, but it's still right-of-way improvements. So it's another piece of paperwork, filing the lien against it and releasing it later so that if the property's sold, it comes back. And I would just suggest that's not necessary for this, but that's just my recommendation, so let me know.
Anybody have any heartache with that? Nope, I don't think so. I think we're good.
Getting towards the last couple of items here then. Doing a good job. Project bidding requirements. So this was a little bit about the discussion that we had before, like the facade improvement program requires the 3 bids, and it actually doesn't require it. It requires it unless you can't get 3 bids, and then they tell you why they can't get 3 bids, or they're a contractor. So we had a little bit of this discussion, but I would suggest that it's written in there, as I stated before, that we're going to only reimburse on the actual expenses and receipts, so that's not an issue, and that we don't require 3 bids. And then finally, timing of completion of improvements, which we actually kind of went around back and forth and had to modify it with the facade improvement program to make sure they have enough time, but also that they don't drag it out and tie up money and get it done soon enough. So, and obviously there's different timeframes between building sidewalks and getting the backhoes out there and doing utility extensions. So the first one there is what the facade improvement is, which is that the construction must be started within 6 months, and then it must be completed within 6 months after it's started. I would suggest for sidewalks in particular that it must be completed within 6 months of funding approval, and I think that's a pretty reasonable time frame for building. 6 months for doing sidewalks, probably more than adequate. If they're asking us for the funds, they're pretty much going to be in a construction project and ready to go, and then a little bit longer, be completed within 1 year for the utility extension program. Any other thoughts?
I think I'm fine with that. I think we're all fine with that. Yep, good.
I have very clear direction at this point of all the points, so if you're willing to make a motion tonight to recommend the standards as recommended by RAC, I've documented them. I could review for the record if you like all of them, but I think it's on
Well, we have them all on record already,
all-
correct?
yeah.
All the removal of the landscaping, basically, and the overhead power lines were the two of the biggest things.
Right. Otherwise it's the staff's other than that, it's staff's recommendations as in the staff report.
For the site, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I motion? I don't even know if I can motion. I think I can make a motion, right? Okay, so, I would, like to make a motion, to move forward with the, redevelopment authority concerning the adoptions of the standards for the utility extension and sidewalk grant program as amended through discussion tonight, in this meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And thank you, Lee, for doing that. You did a great job, and it made it easy for us to go through it 1, 2, 3, and look at that. Thank you. Okay, so any staff reports, updates on matters related to RAC? Anything else, Lee?
Yeah, well, just a quick update. We were reviewing the 5-year plan, and I actually forgot to mention this, but it's okay, I'll mention it now, that we had the Board of Supervisors strategic planning session last week, and one of the things that came up as an objective and a goal for next year is to review this 5-year plan. I mean, as you saw in the item B tonight, and as I mentioned, there's $5 million of unallocated funds over the next 5 years. More as we get out in years because existing obligations are falling off over the next couple of years, which frees up more money. And I think there's interest in having more of a planning effort as to establish some policy onto what redevelopment should be doing in the next 5 years. So I think I anticipate something coming back this year to RAC on that. And other than that, we have the next regular meeting is scheduled in May. We used to have special event applications come in for your review then. We don't have any anymore because we didn't allocate funds for next year for special events, as you saw in there, per past budgeting and discussion. So I'll keep you posted on upcoming items.
I'm sorry, I put my agenda away. Is there a date in May? First Monday? Yeah, thanks. I thought
It is
so.
the first Monday. I don't know the date.
I'm gonna be gone late in the month. Thank you.
Don't be gone during Rib Fest.
I'm going where my wife tells me when we go in late May.
Any RAC member reports on anything? Everybody's happy, okay. Any additional public comment? I'm guessing no, since we have very little public. So for possible action, adjournment. Your motion to adjourn? So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor to adjourn? Aye. Motion carries, meeting adjourned.